Every level of movie Psychopath explained. Level 1. The loose cannon. Pure impulse, no plan, no filter, no off switch. The loose cannon runs on unchecked emotion, rage, jealousy, paranoia, and all of it ready to detonate without warning. Tommy DeVito, Goodfellas. Tommy DeVito is not the most powerful man in the room. He is just the most dangerous one, and Joe Pesci's portrayal of the sociopathic mob soldier in Martin Scorsese's 1990 Goodfellas stands as one of the most volatile performances in cinema history, made even more unnerving by how unplanned the whole thing was. During rehearsals, Scorsese gave the cast complete freedom to improvise and ad-lib, then transcribed those sessions and pulled the best material into a revised shooting script. The result is a character who feels genuinely unscripted because, in a real sense, he partly was. Those sudden explosive rages, the hair trigger shifts from laughter to murder, none of that was manufactured by a director working with a polished scene. It was cultivated from something real that happened in the room during preparation.
Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
Motherfucking mutt! You bought his fucking button at the Seiko.
Tommy DeVito operates as the common soldier of the criminal world, carrying out day-to-day violence with zero long-term calculation, no ambition beyond the next moment. That is exactly what places him here. The danger with Tommy is not that he plans to hurt you, but that something you say, some tone in your voice that you did not even intend, will be enough. His performance went on to directly shape the DNA of The Sopranos, borrowing both its actors and its unromanticized portrait of mob life, and Pesci walked away with the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He earned every second of it. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Henry is not a movie villain. He is a documentary subject who happens to be fictional, and Michael Rooker's debut performance in John McNaughton's 1986 film is one of the most unsettling in American cinema, precisely because it refuses to make the character interesting in any conventional sense. No dramatic backstory, no tortured monologue, no theatrical cruelty. Just a man who kills, and kills differently each time, on purpose. His own logic explains it with chilling practicality.
If you shoot somebody in the head with a .45 every time you kill somebody, it becomes like your fingerprint, see? But if you strangle one and stab another, then the police don't know what to do. What they call a modus operandi.
That is not the speech of a criminal mastermind. It is the operational thinking of someone who survives through randomized brutality rather than intelligence. A man whose continued freedom depends entirely on chaos. The production mirrored the character's stripped-down reality at every level. Shot on 16mm film over 28 days in Chicago, the entire budget came to $110,000. Rooker wore his own clothes, and the director cast a personal friend to play multiple murder victims just to save money. No artifice existed to hide behind, and Rooker never looked for any. The MPAA refused to assign the film anything below an X rating. The British Film Board banned it repeatedly for over a decade, and Roger Ebert praised it without reservation. Henry belongs at level 1 because his violence carries no philosophy, no obsession, and no design. It simply exists, the way weather exists. Frank Booth, Blue Velvet. Dennis Hopper did not audition for Frank Booth. After reading David Lynch's script, Hopper called the director directly and told him, "You have to let me play Frank, because I am Frank." Whether that statement represents the most committed piece of character preparation in Hollywood history or the most alarming personal confession is an open question, possibly both. Frank Booth runs the criminal underworld of Lumberton, North Carolina through violence and terror, and Lynch originally envisioned the character huffing helium during his ritualistic assaults to produce a high-pitched, almost comedic voice. Hopper killed that idea immediately. Drawing from his own experiences in drug culture, he argued the substance should be amyl nitrite, and that single change transformed Frank from a darkly comic figure into something genuinely threatening.
You're like me.
Kyle MacLachlan, who co-starred in the film, later confirmed that Hopper's immersion ran so deep that socializing with him off-set became uncomfortable. Frank did not stay on camera when the director called cut. The psychological architecture that Lynch and Hopper built together is layered and disturbing. Frank's behavior during his assaults oscillates between two personas he identifies as baby and daddy, implying severe childhood trauma and an incestuous psychological history. The American Film Institute ranked Frank Booth among the greatest film villains of all time. Underneath all of the menace, he is simply a man whose emotional wiring will not stop firing, and the inability to help what he is makes him more terrifying than any plan ever could. Begbie, Trainspotting. Francis Begbie stands apart from every other character in Trainspotting for one reason: he is not an addict. Everyone around him is destroying themselves with heroin, and Begbie is destroying himself, and everyone nearby with pure violence. Robert Carlyle's performance in Danny Boyle's 1996 film plays like a prolonged detonation in slow motion, every scene carrying the certainty that one wrong word will end someone. To explain the character's irrational, relentless aggression,
Who the fuck are you? Yeah!
Carlyle constructed a hidden psychological backstory that never appears in the film itself. His reading of Begbie was of a closeted gay man whose explosive violence was driven entirely by fear of exposure. Carlyle pointed to one specific scene where Begbie inadvertently picks up a transgender woman at a nightclub, that one moment where, upon discovering her identity, he backs away quietly instead of attacking, then later threatens to kill his friend Renton if the incident is ever mentioned. That single act of restraint, Carlyle argued, reveals the architecture beneath everything else. Boyle gave Begbie a physical signature built on contradiction, requesting what he described as a homosexual Ian Rush look that produced a mustache, red stay-pressed trousers, and bright pink Pringle jerseys. The appearance borders on comic, the behavior underneath it does not. Begbie was later voted the best Scottish film character in a public poll, and Carlyle is currently developing a spin-off television series tracking Begbie's new life as a sculptor in California. Whatever he does with a chisel, it probably will not be calm. Tony Montana, Scarface. Tony Montana is the American dream in its most deranged form, a Cuban immigrant who builds a cocaine empire, not through strategy, but through appetite, through a feral, bottomless hunger for more. That Brian De Palma's 1983 Scarface follows all the way to its logical, catastrophic end. Al Pacino's performance is enormous and operatic, and every bit of it was intentional. The commitment operated at a physiological level. Pacino maintained his Cuban accent continuously, on-set, off-set, and in Spanish before production officially began.
Why don't you try sticking your head up your ass? See if it fits.
While screenwriter Oliver Stone drafted the script in Paris during his own battle with severe cocaine addiction. That combination may explain why the film understands chemical excess from the inside rather than the outside. The production used powdered baby laxative as a stand-in for cocaine, and the volume Pacino inhaled over the course of filming permanently damaged his nasal passages. Steven Spielberg, visiting the set during the final gunfight, stepped in to direct a single camera shot. The MPAA handed the film an X rating for its cumulative violence and language, and De Palma fought through multiple appeals until the rating dropped to an R. Miami's Cuban community protested the film's portrayal of Cuban immigrants so intensely that production relocated to Los Angeles. Opening as a commercial disappointment, the film was resurrected entirely by the VHS market, and Tony Montana became one of the most referenced characters in cinema history, cited by hip-hop artists, reportedly, Saddam Hussein alike. He belongs at level 1 because the destruction was never calculated. It was appetite, pure, bottomless, and fatal. Level 2. The Obsessive. A psychopath with a target. Everything in the obsessive's world narrows to one person, one goal, one object, and the fixation consumes everything else until nothing outside of it registers at all. Annie Wilkes, Misery. Annie Wilkes does not see herself as a villain. She is a fan, the most devoted, most dangerous fan in the history of cinema, and Kathy Bates's Academy Award-winning performance in Rob Reiner's 1990 adaptation of Stephen King's novel remains the defining portrait of obsession weaponized as care. King later admitted publicly that Annie Wilkes was a metaphor for his own addiction, saying, "Annie was my drug problem, and she was my #1 fan. God, she never wanted to leave." Beyond that, King drew from the psychological profile of Mark David Chapman, the man who assassinated John Lennon, when constructing her. Reiner, for his part, studied Alfred Hitchcock's entire filmography to master the mechanics of suspense before filming a single frame. And to give Bates an emotional anchor, Reiner built an unspoken backstory for Annie involving childhood sexual abuse, which provided the framework for her history of violence against infants and the elderly. The production's biggest creative battle centered on the infamous hobbling scene. King's novel had Annie amputating Sheldon's foot with an axe, and Reiner changed it to a sledgehammer to preserve a thread of audience sympathy.
God's sake.
Bates wanted the axe and reportedly wept before shooting the altered version. The clash between her theater-trained rehearsal habits and James Caan's preference for minimal preparation was something Reiner actively exploited, redirecting Bates's genuine frustration straight into her character's outbursts. The strategy worked. Her Oscar was the first ever awarded for a performance in a horror film, and it has not happened since. Max Cady, Cape Fear. Max Cady is not just dangerous because of what he does. The terror comes from how hard he worked to become capable of doing it, and Robert De Niro's performance in Martin Scorsese's 1991 Cape Fear documents a physical and psychological transformation so total that watching it becomes uncomfortable in its own right. 6 months before filming began, De Niro trained 2 to 3 hours daily, escalating to 5-hour nightly sessions during production to build a hyper-muscular physique, and Scorsese deliberately withheld any full-body shots of him until late in the schedule, letting the audience's imagination fill the gap. $5,000 went to a dentist who deliberately ground down De Niro's teeth, and another $20,000 went to having them restored afterward. That detail alone communicates the depth of the commitment. The film itself came to Scorsese through a trade that has no equivalent in Hollywood. Steven Spielberg held the rights, but swapped the project to Scorsese in exchange for Schindler's List, reportedly because Spielberg was not in the mood to make a movie about a maniac. During production, De Niro put co-star Ileana Douglas through a brutal 17-hour shoot that left her with genuine physical bruising. In the auditorium scene with Juliette Lewis, he bypassed rehearsal entirely and on the first take shoved his thumb into her mouth without warning to capture a real reaction. Katie's terror comes from his precision. He operates just inside the law, using the legal system as a weapon while systematically dismantling everything around his target.
It's not necessary to lay a foul tongue on me, my friend. I could get upset. Things could get out of hand.
Alex Forrest, Fatal Attraction. Glenn Close's performance in Adrian Lyne's 1987 Fatal Attraction was never meant to end the way it does, and the distance between what the film was designed to say and what it ultimately became is one of the most telling stories in Hollywood history. Close consulted multiple psychologists during preparation, and what they told her was both clarifying and sobering. The extreme behaviors she was being asked to portray, including the rabbit boiling scene, were clinically consistent with individuals who had experienced severe childhood abuse. 2 other actresses declined the role specifically because of that scene before Close accepted. Alex Forrest is not a monster. She is a woman whose pain has exceeded the capacity of her psychology to contain it. The original ending, written by screenwriter James Dearden, had Forrest commit suicide by slashing her own throat with Dan's knife while listening to Madame Butterfly, successfully framing him for her murder. Test audiences rejected it completely. Paramount ordered a reshoot. Close fought the change for 2 weeks on the grounds that it reduced a sad, tragic, lonely woman into a cinematic monster, and she eventually relented. Dearden later called the revised ending sexist. The original version screened in Tokyo. 6 Academy Award nominations followed, including Best Picture, and the AFI ranked Alex Forrest among the greatest film villains of all time. She belongs at level 2 because the violence is not evil, it is grief. Level 3. The Mask. The Mask is the psychopath hiding in plain sight. Charming, successful, socially fluent, and completely hollow underneath. This is the most populated level because these characters do not survive by hiding in shadows, they survive by thriving in the light. Patrick Bateman, American Psycho. Patrick Bateman has a morning routine: moisturizer, workout, business card selection, executed with the precision of a surgeon choosing instruments, and then maybe, if the evening goes a certain way, he kills someone. Christian Bale's performance in Mary Harron's 2000 American Psycho is the definitive portrait of the psychopath as product, a human being assembled entirely from surfaces with nothing underneath any of them.
Tonight, I just had to kill a lot of people!
The blueprint for Bateman's hollow charisma came not from criminal psychology research, but from a television interview. Watching Tom Cruise on David Letterman, Bale noticed what he described as an intense friendliness, where Cruise's smile never reached his eyes, and that observation became the exact template for Bateman's vacant sociability. Nobody on the crew knew Bale was Welsh until the wrap party, when he finally dropped the American accent he had held throughout the entire production. Every morning, before arriving on set, he had replicated Bateman's obsessive skincare and fitness routine, and he improvised both the bizarre arm crossing during jump rope and the moonwalk performed immediately before burying an axe in Paul Allen's chest. The studio pushed for Leonardo DiCaprio, then Billy Crudup, then Edward Norton, then Keanu Reeves. Harron held out for Bale throughout. Fashion houses panicked over brand association with a serial killer. Rolex demanded their name be changed to simply The Watch, and Calvin Klein pulled their underwear from the film at the last minute. Today, Bateman has been unironically embraced by internet subcultures as a Sigma male icon, which is precisely the satirical nightmare that Bret Easton Ellis's novel spent 400 pages predicting. Tom Ripley, the talented Mr. Ripley. Tom Ripley does not want power, and revenge has nothing to do with it. What Ripley wants is to be someone else entirely, and Matt Damon's performance in Anthony Minghella's 1999 film is one of the most quietly devastating psychopath portraits in cinema because the violence is never the point. The violence is only what happens when the mask begins to slip.
I always thought it would be better to be a fake somebody than a real nobody.
To convey Ripley's socially invisible quality before he steals Dickie Greenleaf's life, Damon lost 30 pounds and committed to running 6 miles daily while maintaining severe dietary restrictions, and he learned to play the piano specifically for the role. Jude Law moved in the opposite direction, actively building muscle to reflect the physical privilege of an American boarding school upbringing. Their contrasting preparations physically embody the class tension at the center of the film, the gap between what Ripley has and what he is willing to do to close it. Ripley's psychopathy is not born of bloodlust. It is born of desperation, the terror of being exposed as no one, of having the fiction collapse. He kills not because he wants to, but because the alternative is returning to a self he cannot tolerate. The film explores repressed sexuality and class envy simultaneously, turning its protagonist into a monster the audience roots for anyway. 5 Academy Award nominations followed, along with 5 Golden Globe nominations. Ripley belongs at level 3 because the mask is not something he chose to wear. It is the only face he has ever had. Gordon Gekko, Wall Street. Oliver Stone designed Gordon Gekko to be despised. Michael Douglas won the Academy Award for Best Actor playing him, and an entire generation of young financiers walked out of theaters in 1987 wanting to become him. That misreading is one of the most catastrophic in Hollywood history, and its consequences were real. Gekko is a composite built from real figures: Ivan Boesky, Carl Icahn, and Michael Milken primarily, with his defining thesis adapted directly from a 1986 Boesky commencement address at UC Berkeley, in which Boesky told graduating students, "I think greed is healthy. You can be greedy and still feel good about yourself." Douglas researched corporate raiders like T. Boone Pickens to understand the mechanics of hostile takeovers, and screenwriter Stanley Weiser infused the character's rapid-fire dialogue with Stone's own aggressive telephone mannerisms to give Gekko his predatory cadence.
Now listen, Jerry, I'm looking for negative control, okay? No more than 35%. Lunch? Oh, you gotta be kidding. Lunch is for wimps. Okay, Billy, I'll talk at you.
Young financiers cited Gekko as their direct inspiration for entering the industry, which forced Weiser to publish a public op-ed in 2008, explicitly stating that greed is not good. During that same financial crisis, the Australian Prime Minister and a senior Vatican cardinal both publicly named the children of Gordon Gekko as the architects of economic ruin, and Douglas, serving as a UN ambassador at the time, found himself defending a character he had played over 2 decades earlier. A 2013 psychiatric study later identified Gekko as one of the most clinically accurate portrayals of a corporate psychopath on film. He belongs at level 3 because the mask worked so well that even the audience never saw through it. Hans Gruber, Die Hard. Alan Rickman had never appeared in a feature film before Die Hard. At 41 years old, fresh from a Broadway run, his initial reaction to the project was disgust. What followed was one of the most influential villain performances in Hollywood history, delivered while he concealed a medical splint beneath his trousers. Rickman's stage background immediately reshaped the character. He left a note for producer Joel Silver, arguing that a true criminal mastermind would never dress in tactical gear. He would wear a tailored suit and let his subordinates handle the physical work. Silver agreed, and that wardrobe change produced one of the film's most memorable sequences. Gruber, posing as a terrified American hostage among the captives, an improvisation Rickman suggested specifically because the suit let him blend in and deploy a flawless American accent without anyone questioning it. On the very first day of filming, during the first shot of his entire film career, Rickman tore the cartilage in his knee, jumping from a small ledge. A doctor told him he could be sidelined for 6 months. He returned to the 33rd floor that same afternoon, hiding the medical splint under his trousers for the rest of the shoot. For Gruber's iconic death fall, stunt coordinator Charlie Picerni deliberately dropped Rickman's rope on the count of 1, rather than the agreed 3 to capture genuine panic on camera.
Well, I hope that's not a hostage.
Rickman delivered perfect performances on the first take, consistently, and the crew was forced to keep adjusting their lighting setups just to keep up with him. The AFI ranked Gruber among the top 50 film villains of all time. He belongs at level 3 because the suit was always the weapon. Amy Dunn, Gone Girl. Amy Dunn is the most frightening character at level 3 because she understands how the mask functions better than anyone watching her.
I'm the cunt you married. I've killed for you. Who else can say that?
And Rosamund Pike's performance in David Fincher's 2014 Gone Girl is a study in absolute control. A woman who spent her entire life performing the role society assigned her, and finally turned that performance into a weapon. The scheme Amy constructs is a masterpiece of psychopathic architecture. She uses her husband's credit cards secretly to build a hidden evidence trail, forges an entire diary documenting escalating abuse that never occurred, befriends a pregnant neighbor specifically to steal her urine and fake a pregnancy, and physically drains her own blood to stage a violent crime scene. None of this is impulsive. All of it is designed. Fincher demanded extreme physical discipline from Pike to map Amy's transformation from wealthy socialite to disguised fugitive across the film's non-linear shooting schedule, gaining and losing 12 pounds every 2 weeks as the scenes required. Pike did it without complaint, because Amy Dunn would have done the same. The phrase, "gone girling," entered the pop culture vocabulary as a shorthand for elaborate acts of relational sabotage, and the film became Fincher's highest-grossing project, widely regarded as a genre-redefining work. Nominations came from the Academy Awards, the BAFTA, and the Golden Globes. Amy Dunn belongs here because the most dangerous psychopath is the one who studied you before you even noticed her. Lou Bloom, Nightcrawler. Lou Bloom is not a criminal in the traditional sense. He is an entrepreneur. and Jake Gyllenhaal's performance in Dan Gilroy's 2014 Nightcrawler is one of the most precise portraits of capitalist psychopathy ever committed to film. A man who never lacked a moral compass so much as he simply never needed one. 30 pounds came off Gyllenhaal's frame before filming began, producing the gaunt, hollowed aesthetic he described as resembling a nocturnal predator, and Gilroy had first conceived the project in 1988 before shelving it and returning after he discovered the stringer profession in Los Angeles. Freelance video journalists who race to crime scenes and sell footage to local news stations. The production hired the Raichbrook brothers, real-world practitioners of exactly that work, as technical consultants, and they took Gyllenhaal and Gilroy on actual late-night ride-alongs, before making brief cameos in the finished film. The entire shoot spanned 4 weeks across 80 Los Angeles locations. Bloom's summary of his professional philosophy is delivered with the calm of a quarterly report.
I like to say that if you're seeing me, you're having the worst day of your life.
His negotiating tactics include threatening physical harm while maintaining the cadence of a performance review. The film indicts the media ecosystem that rewards his behavior rather than punishing it, and Gyllenhaal's absence from the Academy Award Best Actor nominations was cited widely as one of the most egregious snubs of the year. Lou Bloom belongs at level 3 because he is not hiding behind anything. He is succeeding in plain sight. Level 4. The Broken Mind. These are psychopaths, fractured not by philosophy or fixation, but by the architecture of their own psychology. The broken mind cannot separate reality from delusion. Split personalities, hallucinations, and fractured identities collapse the boundary between what is real and what the mind has constructed in its place. Norman Bates, Psycho. Norman Bates is the character who made psychological horror respectable. Anthony Perkins's portrayal of the shy, dangerously fractured motel proprietor in Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 Psycho established the entire broken mind archetype, a performance so effective that it shaped the language of film terror for the decades that followed. Hitchcock personally financed the production, shooting it with his television crew in stark black and white to demonstrate that a high-quality thriller could be produced cheaply, and he built the entire project on misdirection from day one. The title of Robert Bloch's source novel was withheld from the press to protect the plot, and Saul Bass designed the jagged opening title credits to visually mirror Norman's fractured psychology before the audience had even met him. Perkins was absent during the filming of the shower scene in New York, rehearsing a Broadway production, which required a stand-in for the mother sequences. To avoid revealing the film's twist through voice, sound recordists edited together the voices of 3 different actors, Paul Jasmine, Jeanette Nolan, and Virginia Gregg, shifting between them from line to line, sometimes word to word, creating a vocal presence that could not be traced or identified.
I am sorry, boy, but you do manage to look ludicrous when you give me orders.
Please, Mother.
No, I will not hide in the fruit cellar.
Many critics dismissed the film on release, and audience demand transformed it into a phenomenon anyway. Today, it appears on the American Film Institute's lists of both the greatest and most heart-pounding American films. Norman Bates belongs at level 4, not because he is evil by design, but because his mind simply broke, and no one was there to stop it. Jack Torrance, The Shining. Jack Torrance arrives at the Overlook Hotel already compromised, and Jack Nicholson understood that from the start. Stephen King never forgave him for it. Kubrick's 1980 adaptation of King's novel remains one of the most complete portraits of a mind collapsing under the combined weight of isolation, addiction, and something older and darker than either.
Here's Johnny!
Interior sets for the Overlook were constructed at EMI Elstree Studios in England, modeled on the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite National Park, while exterior geography was captured by second units in Oregon and Montana. Principal photography began in May of 1978 and did not wrap until April of 1979, nearly a full year, with a severe fire in February of that year destroying the Colorado Lounge set and extending an already punishing schedule. Kubrick's approach to performance was rooted in exhaustion, repetitive takes designed to strip away anything artificial, a method that earned the production a Guinness World Record for the most retakes of a dialogue scene. The film received 2 nominations at the inaugural Golden Raspberry Awards, Worst Director for Kubrick and Worst Actress for Shelley Duvall. The Razzie given to Duvall was officially rescinded in 2022 after re-evaluations of Kubrick's documented psychological mistreatment of her during production. King's dissatisfaction with Nicholson's portrayal was widely publicized. His argument was that Nicholson played Jack as already broken before the hotel ever touched him. Kubrick's counterargument was that this was precisely the point. The Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in 2018, and Nicholson belongs at level 4 because the horror in Jack Torrance is entirely human. The hotel only unlocked the door. Travis Bickle, Taxi Driver. Travis Bickle was born in Paul Schrader's car. Schrader wrote the screenplay in 1972 while living in his vehicle during a period of severe personal depression, and the character's alienation, his inability to connect, his festering disgust with everything around him, was not invented. It was transcribed from something real, and Robert De Niro turned that transcription into one of the most influential performances in the history of American cinema. To authentically embody Travis's isolation, De Niro obtained a legitimate New York City taxi license and spent a month working 14-hour shifts across the city's most dangerous boroughs, while simultaneously flying to Italy on weekends to film Bernardo Bertolucci's 1900. The production budget left De Niro and Sybil Shepherd each taking salaries of $35,000, with Scorsese directing for $65,000. Somewhere during production, De Niro told Schrader that Taxi Driver was a film people would be watching 50 years from now. He was right. Travis's iconic mohawk, emerging in the film's climax, was not written into any script. It was an improvised visual signal, a pre-punk declaration of psychological war. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and collected 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, losing famously to Rocky. Travis Bickle belongs at level 4 because his violence is not cruelty. It is a broken man's attempt to impose some kind of order on a world he cannot understand, and the tragedy running underneath it is that part of what he sees is real. Buffalo Bill, The Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal Lecter gets the speeches, Buffalo Bill gets the terror. Ted Levine's portrayal of James Gumb in Jonathan Demme's 1991 film tends to get overshadowed by Anthony Hopkins, and that imbalance has never been fair because Levine built one of cinema's most disturbing characters without a single monologue to lean on. Buffalo Bill is a composite drawn from multiple real serial killers, defined by a psychological dysmorphia so severe that he murders women in an attempt to construct a physical identity for himself. Levine dug extensively into serial murder psychology to separate Gumb's specific pathology from crude stereotypes, and he improvised elements of the chilling casual dance sequence, modulating his vocals throughout to enhance the character's grotesque quality.
I'd fuck me so.
In a 2003 documentary, Levine addressed the ongoing discourse about his performance directly.
There was a lot of flack about him being gay. I never played him as being gay. The stance I took was more one of an acutely homophobic heterosexual man doing that mocking thing. I kind of took it that he was sort of imitating the way his mother might have talked to the poodle. By hearing that voice, in a sense, he's sort of talking to himself, his inner poodle, as it were. He wanted the power that he perceives a woman possesses. I want you, so I'm going to have you. I'm going to have you completely, and that I'm going to skin you and crawl inside you.
Organized protests from LGBTQ+ advocacy groups culminated in demonstrations outside the 64th Academy Awards, and the film won Best Picture regardless, sweeping all 5 major categories and becoming the only horror film in history to accomplish that. Levine received no nomination. Critics have noted that oversight consistently for decades. Buffalo Bill belongs at level 4 because the violence was not chosen. It arrived through suffering, and the person inside it never had much say in the matter. Level 5, The Sadist. The sadist does not simply kill, they need you to suffer first. Pain is the currency, control is the point, and these characters are not detached from what they do, they are fully present in it. Alex DeLarge, A Clockwork Orange. Alex DeLarge loves Beethoven. He loves his droogs. He loves ultraviolence, not as a means to anything, but as an aesthetic experience, a form of self-expression that happens to leave bodies in its wake.
What we were after now was the old surprise visit. That was a real kick, and good for laughs and lashings of the old ultra-violent.
Malcolm McDowell's performance in Stanley Kubrick's 1971 A Clockwork Orange is the defining portrait of sadism as art, and the cost to both the actor and the audience was considerable. Kubrick built his screenplay from the American publication of Anthony Burgess's novel, and that choice carried a specific consequence. The American edition omitted the 21st chapter, the one in which Alex outgrows his violent impulses and experiences genuine moral transformation. By removing that ending, Kubrick locked the character permanently in his sadism, with no arc, no redemption, and no exit from who he is. That was the entire point. Production used real London locations, including the brutalist Thamesmead estate, to keep costs down, and the physical demands on McDowell were severe throughout. In one scene depicting Alex's humiliation by police, co-star Aubrey Morris was directed to spit on McDowell repeatedly through so many of Kubrick's retakes that Morris literally ran out of saliva mid-sequence. Pauline Kael savaged the film after release, and Kubrick himself later requested it be pulled from UK distribution after allegations that it inspired copycat violence. The American Film Institute placed Alex DeLarge 12th on its list of the greatest film villains of all time. The placement is accurate. For Alex, pain is not a tool. It is a pleasure, and that distinction accounts for everything. Mr. Blonde, Reservoir Dogs. Vic Vega did not plan to cut that ear off. That is entirely the point. Michael Madsen's portrayal of Mr. Blonde in Quentin Tarantino's 1992 debut is the purest illustration of sadism as casual entertainment. Violence, not as a statement, not as a message, but as something to do while the radio plays a good song.
I don't really give a good fuck what you know or don't know, but I'm gonna torture you anyway. It's amusing to me to torture.
Madsen originally auditioned for Mr. Pink, the pragmatic, calculating member of the crew, and Tarantino saw something different in him and reassigned him to Mr. Blonde on instinct. That decision defined the film. Reservoir Dogs began as a $30,000 project Tarantino planned to shoot with friends on 16mm black and white film, and actor Harvey Keitel's decision to co-produce changed the entire trajectory, bringing in real funding and New York casting sessions. The warehouse torture sequence, drawing direct inspiration from Sergio Corbucci's Django, required an intricate handheld tracking shot, following Madsen from the dim interior out into full daylight, forcing cinematographer Andrei Sekula to make extreme lighting adjustments in real time. Scored to Stuck in the Middle with You, it caused walkouts at Sundance. Tarantino defended it without apology, saying you don't like violence in movies is like saying you don't like tap dancing sequences in movies. Madsen earned a nomination in the villain category of the AFI's 100 Greatest Heroes and Villains, and he passed away in 2025 at 67 years old, from cardiac arrest, closing a career of over 300 acting credits. Mr. Blonde belongs at level 5 because he is not angry when he picks up the razor. He is entertained. John Kramer, Saw. John Kramer does not consider himself a killer, and that distinction is the foundation of everything built around him. Tobin Bell's portrayal of the Jigsaw Killer in James Wan's 2004 Saw took what could have been a straightforward horror villain and turned him into one of the most philosophically loaded sadists the genre has ever produced. A man who believes, with complete sincerity, that suffering is a form of generosity. Kramer is dying from an inoperable frontal lobe tumor, and after surviving a suicide attempt, he redirects whatever time he has left into what he views as a mission: kidnapping people he believes take their lives for granted, and placing them inside elaborate mechanical traps designed to force extreme physical self-mutilation in exchange for survival. In his framework, anyone who endures the pain is reborn by it. The agony is the gift. Wan and Lee Wanell developed the concept in 2001, shot a short film to attract producers after failing to find backing in Australia, and the strategy secured both a budget and the immediate formation of Twisted Pictures. The entire feature was shot in 18 days. Lionsgate planned a direct-to-video release until enthusiastic audience responses at Sundance changed the math completely. Bell's delivery of became one of the most quoted lines in modern horror, and Bell returned for the 2023 prequel-sequel Saw X to strong results. He belongs at level 5 not because Jigsaw enjoys your death, he enjoys your choice. Calvin Candy, Django Unchained. Leonardo DiCaprio had never played a villain before Calvin Candy, spending his career building characters of moral complexity, leading men capable of nobility and failure in roughly equal measure. Calvin Candy offers none of that. He is a wealthy, brutal plantation owner who hosts slave death matches for personal entertainment, and DiCaprio played him with a level of commitment that left blood on the floor, literally.
Lay your palm flat on that tabletop. If you lift those palms off that turtle shell tabletop, Mr. Pooch is gonna let loose with both barrels that sawed off.
Tarantino began developing Django Unchained in 2007, and Candy's look and manner were partly modeled on a distorted version of Rhett Butler. During the pivotal dining room confrontation, where Candy attempts to justify slavery through pseudoscience, DiCaprio slammed his fist on the table so hard mid-monologue that he shattered a glass and severely lacerated his left hand. He kept going. He continued the scene while picking shards of glass from his flesh, and Tarantino kept the cameras running until he called cut, at which point the crew gave DiCaprio a standing ovation. The film drew fierce controversy for the frequency of racial slurs throughout, with Spike Lee publicly boycotting the release, while Samuel L. Jackson defended the language as historically necessary. Academy Awards for Best Original Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor for Christoph Waltz followed. DiCaprio belongs at level 5 because Calvin Candy does not hate the people he destroys. He enjoys them. As far as he is concerned, there is no meaningful difference between those two things. Level 6, The Philosopher. The Philosopher has constructed an entire intellectual framework to justify what they do, and they are entirely comfortable inside it. These psychopaths do not experience themselves as insane. They experience themselves as clear-eyed, as people who have had the courage to follow logic where others stopped. John Doe. 7. John Doe does not want to escape. He wants to be understood.
Only in a world this shitty could you even try to say these were innocent people and keep a straight face. We see a deadly sin on every street corner, in every home, and we tolerate it.
And Kevin Spacey's portrayal of the 7 deadly sins killer in David Fincher's 1995 Seven is constructed entirely around withholding, a character who exists as an absence for most of the film, whose philosophy arrives fully formed in the third act and destroys everything it touches. Andrew Kevin Walker wrote the screenplay from genuine personal misery, having moved to New York City during a period of rising crime and drug addiction that produced the film's oppressive atmosphere, and talent agents repeatedly refused to pass the script to their clients, calling it inherently evil and misogynistic. Fincher initially pursued Ned Beatty for the role of Doe, and Gary Oldman was approached for an unspecified part before Spacey was cast. To protect the shock of Doe's voluntary surrender in the third act, Spacey's name was removed from all marketing materials and opening credits entirely. The production team spent tens of thousands of dollars creating approximately 6 complete handwritten journals for the character, thousands of pages of twisted philosophy and disturbing imagery designed to establish Doe's intellectual seriousness before he ever appeared on screen. Studio executives at New Line Cinema pushed hard against the head-in-a-box conclusion, demanding something less bleak, and Fincher, still rebuilding credibility after a dismal experience on Alien 3, refused to direct the film unless the original ending was preserved. The gamble produced one of the most shocking conclusions in cinema history. John Doe belongs at level 6 because he is not unhinged by any internal measure. By his own reckoning, he is entirely correct. The Joker, The Dark Knight. Heath Ledger described his version of the character as a psychopathic, mass-murdering, schizophrenic clown with zero empathy. And that description functions simultaneously as an accurate character sketch and a self-diagnosis for a performer who immersed himself so completely that the line between preparation and psychological damage became genuinely difficult to locate. Ledger secluded himself for approximately 1 month reading comics and developing the character's physical vocabulary, drawing influence from Malcolm McDowell's Alex DeLarge and the chaotic energy of Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten. A disturbing Joker diary consumed 4 months of his preparation, filled with images he believed the character would find funny. His vocal cadence, mixing high and low pitches in unsettling ways, came from studying the discomfort generated by ventriloquist performances.
You want order in Gotham. Batman must take off his mask and turn himself in. Every day he doesn't, people will die. Starting tonight. I'm a man of my word.
Sleeping only 2 hours a night during production, Ledger reported feeling physically paralyzed at the end of filming days. And on January 22, 2008, 6 months before the film opened, he died from an accidental, toxic combination of prescription drugs. Nolan captured key sequences using IMAX 70mm cameras, and The Dark Knight crossed $1 billion at the global box office. Ledger swept the posthumous awards cycle, taking the Academy Award, Golden Globe, and BAFTA for Best Supporting Actor in what became the first time a comic book adaptation had secured a major acting Oscar. The Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in 2020. Ledger belongs at level 6 because the Joker does not want chaos without purpose. He wants to prove a point, specifically, that everyone is one bad day away from becoming him. Thanos. Avengers Infinity War. Thanos is the only character on this list who commits genocide and genuinely believes he is being kind.
Pretty, isn't it? Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
And Josh Brolin's performance in the Russo brothers' 2018 Avengers Infinity War translates a purple cosmic warlord into something philosophically coherent, a villain whose logic, however horrifying, holds together from the inside. The argument Thanos makes is Malthusian. Unchecked population growth leads to resource depletion leads to collapse, and the mathematically precise solution is eliminating exactly half of all life in the universe. He does not hate the people he destroys. His conviction is that the survivors owe him their existence, and it is that conviction, not the power behind it, that makes him frightening. Unlike every other character at this level, Thanos exists entirely as a digital construction, which meant Brolin delivered a feature-length, emotionally nuanced performance entirely through motion capture, performing against human-sized co-stars while standing on elevated platforms or wearing a backpack fitted with a pole topped by a small cardboard cutout of Thanos' face to maintain correct eye lines. Real-time visualization technology let the Russo brothers see a live digital composite of the character on their monitors, while Brolin acted on the soundstage. As one visual effects supervisor put it, if Thanos didn't work, then we wouldn't have a movie. Combined with Endgame, the duology grossed over $4.79 billion worldwide. Thanos belongs at level 6 because his cruelty is compassion. Inside his own logic, there is no contradiction at all. Level 7, the Abyss. Beyond motive, beyond reason, beyond any framework that might allow explanation. Level 7 is not a psychological category. It is an absence. Anton Chigurh, No Country for Old Men. In 2014, a Belgian psychiatry professor and 10 associates spent 3 years watching 400 films, identifying 126 psychopathic characters across cinema history, and when they ranked those characters by clinical realism, Javier Bardem's Anton Chigurh came out on top as the most accurate portrayal of a real psychopath ever committed to film. That finding is the entire argument for why he sits at the top of this list.
Would you hold still, please, sir?
Joel and Ethan Coen adapted Cormac McCarthy's novel because they recognized McCarthy as someone using the Western template to build a meditation on fate, conscience, and the death of the American soul. With Chigurh as the instrument of that meditation, he carries a captive bolt stunner designed for livestock, decides whether you live or die by the flip of a coin, does not negotiate, does not deviate, and when pressed to explain his actions, offers only the logic of natural law. Things fall the way they fall, and he was always going to be here. The coin was always going to land this way. Bardem's physical transformation centered on a pageboy haircut so jarring that during pre-Oscar lobbying events, other attendees isolated themselves from him at parties. They were not seeing an actor, they were seeing Chigurh. The Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor went to Bardem. Best Picture went to the film. Critics writing after Cormac McCarthy's death in 2023 noted that No Country for Old Men remains as steady and unyielding as a myth. Anton Chigurh does not belong at level 7 because he is the most violent character here. He belongs here because his logic is internally consistent, airtight, and has no room anywhere inside it for you. Hannibal Lecter, The Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins appears on screen for fewer than 25 minutes in The Silence of the Lambs and won the Academy Award for Best Actor. A ratio that has never been replicated and probably never will be, because what Hopkins does in those minutes is not perform so much as occupy. Hannibal Lecter does not project menace, he radiates it.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Before Demi's 1991 film, Brian Cox had played the character in Michael Mann's 1986 Manhunter with quiet restraint. Hopkins received the call about the role while sitting in a London dressing room, at a point when he had largely set aside any expectation of achieving A-list Hollywood status and returned to theater. That phone call permanently redirected what remained of his career. The performance he built rests on extreme physical stillness, unblinking eye contact, and a degree of restraint so total that the slightest movement carries weight. Working from behind the glass of his cell, Lecter functions as a mirror that reflects the specific fears of whoever looks directly at him, and his arrangement with Clarice Starling constitutes the film's emotional center. He will not help her hunt Buffalo Bill unless she pays in childhood trauma, exchanging her deepest memories for his tactical assistance. The film swept all 5 major Academy Awards, the only horror film in history to accomplish that. Every subsequent adaptation and sequel attempted to recapture what Hopkins built in those 25 minutes and came up short. He belongs at level 7 because Hannibal Lecter does not lose control. He is control, and every choice he makes consciously. That is the most terrifying thing in this entire video. John Ryder, the Hitcher. John Ryder arrives out of a desert storm and offers no explanation for himself. He never will. Rutger Hauer's performance in Robert Harmon's 1986 The Hitcher is probably the least recognized performance on this list, and that gap represents a real oversight, because what Hauer built is one of the most psychologically layered portraits of a man who has already finished with himself and is waiting for someone to make it official.
The gun is loaded. Put it in my face. Right there.
Screenwriter Eric Red drew direct inspiration from The Doors' Riders on the Storm, using the song's atmosphere to construct the antagonist's entire identity from the ground up. Hauer had played enough villains to approach any new one with caution, but he read the script and accepted without hesitation. His interpretation extended far past what the text provided. Where the script offered a supernatural force of pure nihilism, Hauer layered in something more complicated. A broken man, possibly a Vietnam veteran, whose repeated taunting of Halsey with is not a sadist toying with prey, it is a death wish. He cannot do it himself. He needs the boy to be the one who finishes it. Commercial failure greeted the film on release, and home video turned it into a cult classic, celebrated for atmospheric tension and Hauer's strange, hypnotic work. The Outfest Legacy Project and the UCLA Film and Television Archive later preserved it, and in September of 2024, a 4K restoration was released after the original camera negative was recovered from the Warner Brothers vaults. John Ryder belongs at level 7, not because of what he does to other people. He belongs here because, of everyone on this list, he may be the only one who is already gone. Michael Myers, Halloween. Michael Myers has no motive. That is the founding principle, established on the first day John Carpenter and co-writer Deborah Hill sat down to write the screenplay. A shape rather than a man, pure evil without origin or explanation. And Nick Castle's portrayal in Halloween 1978 involved no method preparation, no character research, no psychological framework. It involved a walk. That walk became one of the most recognizable things in cinema history. The film started when independent producer Irwin Yablans approached Carpenter with a single request: make a movie about babysitters getting killed. Carpenter and Hill moved the premise to Halloween night, named the fictional town of Haddonfield, Illinois after Hill's hometown in New Jersey, and chose the killer's name as a tribute to a European distributor of Carpenter's previous film. The screenplay was written in under 2 weeks. The score was composed in 3 days. 20 days of shooting on a budget of roughly $300,000 produced a film that earned back many times that amount. Castle was selected not for any acting background, but for the specific quality of his walk, a physical grace he likely inherited from his father, a professional film choreographer. Carpenter directed him from behind the camera with simple instructions: walk here, walk there, tilt your head. That head tilt, developed after Castle pinned a victim to the wall, became so deeply embedded in the character's identity that Castle was brought out of retirement to recreate it in the 2018 reboot, donning the mask for that single gesture to bridge 40 years of cinematic history. Dr. Loomis describes Michael Myers as possessing
the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
He belongs at level 7 because there is nothing behind them to describe. If you enjoyed this deep dive video about movie Psychopaths, you're going to love the one on your screen, so go check it out now.